You know, but I think there's another thing, which is, and look, I mean, again, I am in the public school system. I have to get my kids to pass the PSSAs. If we do not score at a high level in the PSSAs, the school district of Philadelphia is going to strip every exemption from every curricular, everything we have. So we walk that fine line. But there are ways to do it that we don't become slavishly devoted to this stuff. And here is where I can challenge independent schools. Here is where I can challenge wealthy suburban districts like Lower Merion and what have you. When you talk about your schools and you talk about what makes your schools special and unique and powerful, do you talk about a system of learning? Or do you talk about how high your SAT scores are? And we have to own that. Because on some level, the independent schools, you guys, I mean, I am convinced that when I am forced out of the publics because they have turned it into something that I can no longer recognize, the only place left for somebody like me is going to be the independent schools, where we can talk about education. I mean, the Quaker schools are gorgeous, beautiful, wonderful, amazing. A lot of this is stolen right from Quaker education. But I listen to some of the independent schools talk about what makes their schools awesome. And you guys are buying into the exact thing you don't need, the stuff that we would kill to be freed from. So that's my challenge to you guys, is how do you talk about your schools? And yes, we can never, you know, one of the things to speak to your point, we can never be revolutionaries at the expense of our children, right? That's the key. And the other thing is, Gary Steger has this great line, he says, the only thing worse than a traditional classroom is a bad progressive one. Right, and I can cop to that. But we don't have to buy into it as much as we do. We say to kids, you know, at SLA they take the SATs, da 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 da. When they break 1800, if they break 1800, we've had kids, you know, some of our, you know, our top achieving kids do. When they get to that level, I say stop. Stop taking it. It's enough. It's good enough. Now what else are you? What else does your profile look like? What else are you going to tell a college? You know, and so we can never divorce ourselves that part of what we're about is that ranking and sorting system, as opposed to what we really want to be about, which is about educating. But we don't have to buy in quite as much as we do. That's my answer. Yep.
So are you optimistic that higher education is starting to make these changes and recognizing it or not?
Oh God. What day of the week is it? I mean, honestly, so on my best days, I think that we're in the last vestiges of a dying way of thinking about education, and that Secretary Duncan is the last of a kind. On my worst days, I am deeply, deeply, deeply frightened for what we're doing. And on my most honest days, where I think we're going is a bifurcated system, where the wealthiest kids in America and those who can get scholarships will have this wonderful education that is enriching and powerful and meaningful. And for everybody else when we say a college degree is necessary, they're going to go to an online college because the finances of public education, of higher education don't work. And does everybody know, to prove that point, anybody know what college in America has the highest enrollment?
University of Phoenix.
That is correct. University of Phoenix enrolls more kids than any other school in America. That should chill. How many people have ever taken a class at the University of Phoenix? Has anybody ever done that? When I moved from New York to Pennsylvania, the Pennsylvania Harrisburg, the Department of Education said I was one that the coursework I took at Teachers College wasn't sufficient, and I was short one school finance class to get my permanent state cert for administration. And so I was planning the school. My wife was pregnant. I was not going to go I was going to take that class the easiest way possible. So I took a University of Phoenix school finance class. If that's what passes for education these days, we are in a lot of trouble. So in my most honest days, I think that's what we're headed. Is I think this crazy bifurcated system where it's almost, it's almost replicating what we had. It's what we had 80 years ago, where if you're wealthy and you manage the system and da-da-da-da, and where we'll be better at it is we will create scholarships and we will do those things so there will be some slice of underprivileged kids who get access to those worlds. But you get to go to Harvard and Yale and wherever else. And for the rest of you, you can just learn online. That's good enough. Yeah?
Is there any model that you've seen of online education that is interactive and powerful?
Oh yeah, there's tons. I mean, SLA, we use Moodle in every single class. And every single class at SLA is completely blended. I think Drexel does a really good job of it. I think Drexel does an amazing job of creating that sort of hybrid space. I think there's a lot. The difference is, and I think for some of them, I think online education is amazing at training. I don't, and I think in some of the good ones, you still get people who come together and make meaning together and da-da-da-da-da-da. But most of it is exactly what they say it is. It's just like it's marketed. Do you have enough time? You're the rushed, person in your life. You've got a kid, you've got family, you've got a job, you've got this, you've got that. Here, take these classes, you can get your degree. That's fine. It's just,
I'm sorry to follow.
No, please.
We're an IB school, as well as a French school, and IB has this dynamic of teaching to these tests. It's
right.
International tests, but it's also project-based
right.
and essays. And so I think it's got some of what's good in both models. And we've been looking at some online IB courses because we're not big enough to keep
right.
offering one. But the word hybrid is what caught me in what you said, because I'm feeling that that's where it really is. That you can have some online pieces, but you need the face-to-face
right.
discussion in person, because otherwise it's so canned. Even if you're talking to kids in Thailand and
I think it's a challenge. And I don't think we know yet. You know what I mean? I will say that, so one of the most profound experiences for SLA was in our planning year, where we set up a Moodle, none of us had ever used Moodle in our classrooms before, but we knew that was the learning management system we wanted to go with. And so we set up an instance of it, and I had my whole faculty hired by April, and we had a lot of work to do. We had to plan an entire school from April to September, beyond the sort of conceptual ideas that I had. And we wrote a 30-page document, basically having met once in my backyard at a barbecue for about an hour and a half. And otherwise, we planned the whole school online. So there is no question that it can be meaningful. There is no question in my mind that thoughtful facilitation of online learning can be unbelievable. And for small schools, it is essential. I just was, when I was working in Texas, I was talking with these folks who, rural West Texas, they're the superintendent of schools. He was like, "Hi, I'm the superintendent of schools." I'm like, "Hi, nice to meet you." He's like, "Yeah, we have 350 kids, K to 12." And I was like, "Wow," and we forget. And for him, online learning is the only way that he can open up his courseware, open up his course offerings. There are economies of scale. But we have to be really thoughtful about it. I like the folks at the Virtual High School Consortium. I think they're doing really interesting things because it's teachers teaching. It's not canned curriculum. And I think anytime you can move away from canned curriculum and relationships, the idea of teacher mentoring can happen anywhere. How many people here are on Twitter? Just out of curiosity, right? How many of you have met somebody that influenced you on Twitter and then you met them in person? You were like, "Oh my God, finally we meet." Right? The relationship you had with them before you met them online was real. That's an honest relationship. That is powerful. We just have to be really thoughtful about the way we do it. And anything that is sort of pre-sequenced is training. Anything that involves human interaction, I think, gets us closer to education. And that, in my head, is how I sort of believe it. Any other questions about what you talked about with your vision? Yeah?
Do kids have to test to get into your school?
How do you get into SLA? That's a great question. So we are a magnet school. We're a weird magnet, though. And we have, according to the school district, the most academically diverse group of kids in any of the special admission high schools in Philadelphia. So we do look at your test scores. We look at your test scores, we look at your grades, we look at your attendance. We call every single guidance counselor of every single kid who applies, who interviews. And then the most important, though, is the interview, which is you come with a project, something you did in 7th or 8th grade. You bring it to SLA, and you sit down with one of our teachers and one of our students, and we interview you. And we ask you to tell us about your project, tell us about the way you learn, tell us about why you want to come to SLA. The way you get an interview is you ask for one. And that says so in the directions. There's no pre-screen. So the overwhelming majority of our kids got proficient or advanced on the PSSAs. But we have a subset that also, I mean, we have a decent representation across the top 3 quartiles. We don't have the resources as allocated in the school district budget to really, really deal with a lot of kids who are coming in 2 and 3 and 4 grade levels behind. If they want to fund us at that level, we could do it. I've talked to Dr. Ackerman about that, but they don't, the magnet schools get a much lower per pupil expenditure than the comprehensive, so we don't have that kind of budget. Could it work with a more diverse? I think so, with the right resources. But we take kids, I mean, our average PSSA is still lower than Central's minimum requirement. So we take a very, very academically diverse group of kids. And the interview really is important. We turn down a lot of kids with 4.0s because when we say, tell us how you learn, they're like, well, I like the desks and rows and I like to take tests. And we're like, great, Central's not, go to it. And that's nothing against, Central's a really cool place. It's just a very, and I think that Dr. Pavel would admit that. He would say, yes, we are more traditional in our outlook than SLAs. We're the weird progressives. All right, I want to move you guys forward. So questions, right? How do we innovate? A lot of these questions that, we asked. First, I think ideas have to live in practice. What does that mean? That means that whatever you say you do, you should do, right? And I'm going to give you a couple of examples of that, right? SLA as a common language of teaching and learning. The way that we actually do make sure that things are what they are is the way we plan, the way we talk about teaching, the way we work is common. It is, it is a standardization of process, not a standardization of curriculum. And that's a very important distinction. So we already talked about this, the common inputs, inquiry, research, collaboration, presentation, and reflections, got to be part of the way you plan every single unit. Common process. Everybody uses understanding by design to plan their units. Is understanding by design the end-all and be-all of unit planning? I don't think so. What did I say about the most important tool? It's the one you use together. It works for us. Are there others? Sure. But the point is that when I was a teacher and I was in the classroom, when we used to schedule these times for collaboration, and I sat down with the other English teacher of the 11th grade, we spent half our time talking about the way we plan before we ever am seeing the nodding smile, the knowing head nods. Which is, you spend half the time, well, this is the way I unit plan, let me explain this to you first, then this will all make sense. Here's the back of my napkin where I write my lesson plans on. When you have a common process, you lower the bar of understanding, right? I think kids get lost in schools because they spend so much time trying to figure out each adult. When you have common inputs, common process, and then a common output, where this is our school-wide rubric for every single project, every single major project we did is graded on this rubric. And the language of education is the same. Kids spend less time figuring out the adults and more time figuring out the work, which is what we want. And it's amazing. One of our teachers, for a reflective exercise at the end of the unit, one of the things he does every year is he gives the kids a sort of 10-minute overview of understanding by design. And then he says, all right, your reflective unit is to reverse engineer the unit we just did. Can you figure out what we just did together? And usually they can. And the really fun thing is to watch it in a 10th grade class. And the kids usually go, oh, that's why you guys all talk the same. And it's really cool.